myth itself was probably formed out of the initial shamanic experience of going out into these other worlds and having these otherworld experiences and coming back. And I think one of the main things that the shaman actually does is bring those experiences down into language.
Shamanism, a worldview within which mediation between physical and spirit dimensions becomes possible through ecstatic states of consciousness.
The study, the appreciation, and to some extent the sharing of shamanic experience is an important bridge back to a consciousness, which was the dominant one many thousands of years ago.
The basic principle of shamanism, I come to understand it when it's stripped of the cultural particularities, is the use of entering an altered state of consciousness, an expanded state of consciousness, and for the purposes of obtaining knowledge, for healing, or seeking guidance or vision.
Several of the earliest mystery cults in the Greco-Roman world were catalyzed by contact between Greek culture and a shamanic culture to the north of Greece, in places like Thrace and Scythia. And around the 7th century BC, the argument goes, trade routes opened up between Greece and these northern regions, and the Greeks came in contact with shaman-like characters. The principal feature of shamanism is that the shaman is able to leave his or her body. It's called ecstasy, ecstasis, to stand outside the body. The shaman has something inside him or her that is detachable from the body, that can leave. And this is the source of the shaman's ability to heal, to bring esoteric knowledge back to his or her people from other realms. The Greeks, when they encountered this phenomenon, seem to have generalized it in a way that the shamans themselves hadn't. And among the Orphics and the Pythagoreans especially, came to be believed that not just the shaman, but all human beings, in some sense possessed this fundamental duality, that not only within the shaman, but within everybody, there is something that is detachable from the body, that is not made of matter, that especially is not born when the body is born and does not die when the body dies. That's something that it was given a name, and the name was psyche in Greek. Psyche is how we pronounce it now, and the word means soul. And this is the origin, as far as scholars are able to determine, of the concept of the human soul in the history of Western thought. And so there seems to be a very mysterious shamanic catalytic element in the formation of the soul concept in Western civilization. And this then gets taken up by Plato. That becomes an absolutely central part of his philosophical system and worldview, that then serves as the foundation for the subsequent history of Western thought.
So just at a sensory level, a culture that is in harmony with its environment is more attuned to the subtleties of the environment in which it exists. When you go into the Amazon, just at the material level, we think of food as something that comes from the grocery store. They're able to see subtle things in the forest that from our untrained eye are invisible.
If a plant at, say, 3,000 feet elevation up the side of the volcano comes into bloom in late April, then people who are up there gathering herbs recognize, when that blossom comes into bloom, that means that particular little fish down in the tide pools down the coast will also come in, and it's a time to go catch that fish. So they've got a system of watching how the whole network of life forms are creating this calendrical signaling system. And then wherever you are, if you're tuned in enough to know that system, to have recognized it through generations and generations of observation, then you know how to steward, really, how to take what you need and take care of all of these different parts of that complex system. That's the level of attention that ideally we should be paying to nature right here.
Shamanism is extremely important for several reasons. One is that it's one of the best ways to give the dominant culture a way of seeing that the natural world and human nature are not so encased as the current paradigm would suggest. Amazing things happen and even can be made to happen. There are other dimensions, there are other beings, other ways of knowing, other ways of experiencing, and there are rules and procedures which make this happen.
It's interesting that they use two metaphors for shamans or descriptions. One, they call them trackers. That's like also called soul retrieval, or it's like psychotherapy, or like diagnosis of an illness, you see. The other metaphor they use is spirit lawyer. They say problems arise in a family, or we would call psychological problems, and sometimes physical illnesses, because we've offended their spirits in some way, or we've failed to acknowledge them properly. And the shaman being the one who knows the spirit world and how to access it, and who knows the songs and the names of the spirits. That's like having the access code, you know, in computer language, or the telephone number, how to get hold of these people, these beings. The spirits of the environment, like the waterfall or the forest or the river, or, you know, and so we don't do that. You know, if we went to a shaman and he might say, well, your problems come from the pollution in the river. You guys need to clean up the river. How can you expect to be healthy? You know, our worldview in terms of healing involves where you're ill, you go to the doctor, and the doctor gives you a pill or does a surgery, and then you take something out or put something in to your system. So supposing you live in a South American community and you feel out of sorts, you go to the shaman. He or she might take ayahuasca before he gives you anything, in order to see what is the origin of the illness by using expanded perception. Then he's likely to express that in symbolic languages. He might talk about the serpent, or wouldn't necessarily say viruses or anything like that. And he might talk, very often he'll talk about sorcery. Like somebody has negative intention to you and sent you a little dart. Now we think that's ridiculous, no, sorcery doesn't exist. But what it is it's a recognition of the power of thought. So every time you think a thought, you're affecting the consciousness of everyone who comes into contact with that thought, including the collective. So every time we think a thought, for example, that's why programming in the media is such a phenomenally impactful course. We participate in it and we feed that system and we're fed by it. And just think of the multiplication of thought forms and images that stimulate you to buy stuff, and that's the salvation of happiness.
Disenchantment, the radical dislocation of the ground of meaning from the world as conscious intelligence to the human self alone.
New media and technologies have been a great boon to humanity, but at the same time, there's a great distancing between ourselves and reality. All kinds of filters go up. Through our disenchantment with the natural world.
In tribal cultures, there's often rites of passage. It's almost universal that young men and young women will have initiatory experiences that will introduce them to the other world. And definitely losing our connection to those kind of rites of passage has, I think,